Buddha Bhagawan. Oh, I can hear my voice echo. If someone could please fix that. Thanks. I'll keep talking though. The Buddha Bhagawan Shakyamuni appeared in this world and taught a stainless continuum of Dharma, which we are the practitioners of now. Okay, I think the echo has stopped. Thank you. So first, Buddha Shakyamuni developed the spirit of enlightenment. He generated the attitude to achieve full enlightenment for the sake of all beings, and then went on to accumulate the collections throughout three great countless eons, and then finally achieved Buddhahood. And then after having achieved Buddhahood, he accomplished the welfare of sentient beings. So having first generated the mind of enlightenment, how did he do that? What was that mind of enlightenment? It was the thought, may I achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all mother sentient beings. And essentially, this is what we are now training in as our topic for these classes, right? Mahayana mind generation. And there are two main practice instructions for generating it. First, you have the sevenfold cause and effect instructions. And second, you have the instructions of equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. With respect to the first, the sevenfold cause and effect instructions, one first needs to create a foundation with equanimity. So to become impartial towards all sentient beings, and this is not easy at all. It's not something you can do by thinking, oh, now all beings are equal in my mind. It doesn't happen that quickly. It requires a lot of reasoning and training in that thought in order to do so. So the first of the sevenfold cause and effect instructions is recognizing all sentient beings to be one's mother. And this is very important foundationally for the later realizations of compassion and love, because without this fundamental thought that all beings have been one's mother, then that love and compassion could become partial or biased towards only certain sentient beings. So starting with applying this thought to all sentient beings, we also have to reason ourselves into how it could possibly be true. Well, there's been no beginning to our rebirths in samsara. We cannot pinpoint a start. So we have taken countless births in the past. And in those births, in most of those births, we have had a mother, as we have discussed out of the four births, right? And in those births where we have had a mother, they have been our mother. Sentient beings have acted as our mother, just as the mother of this life has acted with great kindness as our mother. So we should contemplate in this way, that in the past, we have had so many rebirths with sentient beings being our mother. And likewise, in the future, we will continue to take rebirths in which sentient beings will kindly act as our mother. So if you can realize this, that all sentient beings have and will continue to be my mother, then naturally the thoughts of recollecting their kindness and wishing to repay their kindness will come. So we covered recollecting the kindness of our mothers in a previous class. And today we're going to move on to the wish to repay them. So as you can see, it's a very long paragraph, and Geshe said to just paraphrase it and summarize it. So Geshe has essentially read half of it, and I'm just going to paraphrase what he took away from it. So wishing to repay is essentially considering the kindness of our parents and understanding that as they have been so kind to us, it is only right that we repay them in kind. So, in brief, taking one's own mother of this life as one's example, we apply her example to all other mother sentient beings and recognize that they are tortured by suffering. They don't have the wisdom to discriminate what is a good path of action to achieve higher rebirth and liberation. They are only under the influence of ignorance. And therefore, such a suffering person can only be protected by their child. It is only right that their child protect them from the paths that lead to lower realms and so forth. So Geshe read down to the end of the paragraph, and again, just to paraphrase, there are two ways you can repay the kindness of your parents. You can repay it in a temporal way, or you can repay it in an ultimate way. So to repay it in a temporal way is to help the parents of this life with whatever they need, with acquiring wealth, or just helping them out around the house, or taking them to hospital, right? Whatever fulfills their immediate needs that you as a child can do. And that is a genuine repaying of kindness, right? We're not trying to discount that. But here in this context, since the wish to repay kindness applies to all sentient beings, therefore, the attitude we are trying to engender is a wish not to forsake any sentient being at all, and a wish that they may all be free from suffering and that they may be placed in the joy of liberation. This is the ultimate and real wish to repay the kindness. So as the translator, so me, as I explain what Geshe is saying about these sevenfold cause and effect instructions, you, the students, should be essentially meditating on it as you hear it. So next we move on to love, and this refers to affectionate love. So after you've recognized all sentient beings as your mother, then it's quite easy to recollect their kindness and to wish to repay their kindness. And when you give rise to those qualities or realizations, it's also easier to give rise to this sort of love. So this sort of love in this context is the kind of love that a mother would have towards their child, right? They always see them with affection. It's not, by definition, great love, right? It's an affectionate love like a mother would have for their child. So you'll notice that in Tsongkhapa's Lam Rim and also here in the Essence of Refined Gold, there's not that much explanation on how to develop this sort of love. And that's because most of the explanation went into the previous instructions on recognizing all beings to be your mother, being mindful of their kindness and wishing to repay their kindness. And that indicates that if you're able to give rise to those thoughts correctly, then giving rise to this sort of love is easy, right? It comes naturally. So as I said, this isn't great love, because great love is defined as the thought, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be happy. May they encounter happiness, and may I bring them to happiness, right? That's great love. And that is also a thought that we should try to engender at all times. Next is compassion. So because it's so short, we'll just read it out. Here, compassion is the thought, why shouldn't mother sentient beings who are aching from suffering be separated from suffering? May they be separated from it. May I contribute to their being separated from it. So this is great compassion. And without great compassion that fully fulfills the definition of great compassion, you cannot give rise to bodhicitta, right? Mahayana mind generation. because its root is compassion. And as Chandrakirti says right at the start of his text called Entering the Middle Way, compassion alone is regarded as the seed of a conqueror's excellent harvest, as water for its growth, and as the ripened state for long enjoyment. Therefore, at the beginning, I praise compassion. So at the beginning of Chandrakirti's text on the middle way, he praises compassion. So likewise, when we practice, compassion acts as the seed for our Mahayana practice. It is the water and fertilizer that is added for the Mahayana qualities to grow. And likewise, it ripens everything into a state of long enjoyment. So it's essentially the pillar for bodhicitta, right? It is the seed for bodhicitta. Um, it is, again, what waters the good qualities of the Mahayana. And when you become a Buddha, you develop all these amazing Buddha qualities and you enjoy them for a very long time. So this is all due to compassion. We should be able to identify the nature of great compassion and its object. So its object is all sentient beings, and its aspect is a wish that they may be separated from suffering. So all these sentient beings who are tortured by the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering that we have covered in our previous studies of the paths in common with medium capacity beings. May they be separated from those sufferings, and may I separate them from those sufferings. So that mind with that object and that aspect is great compassion. So we say compassion, compassion, but compassion can be different things. It could be great compassion, or it could be boundless compassion or limitless compassion. So limitless compassion is something that even the hearers and solitary realizers can generate. And they generate such a compassion because their boundless compassion doesn't have that aspect of wishing to take on responsibility to free all sentient beings from their suffering. So that's the difference between boundless compassion and great compassion. Here, this thought of great compassion is one that's taking responsibility. It's thinking, may I separate beings from their suffering? It's very powerful. So when you divide great compassion, the 3 divisions given in the greater treatises are compassion observing merely sentient beings, compassion observing phenomena or dharma, and compassion without object. So it would be odd to present these 3 divisions without clarifying them a little bit. So the main difference between these 3 types of great compassion is their object of observation. Their aspect is the same. What they're observing, they wish to be free from suffering. So that thought is the same. It's just the object that they observe is slightly different. So to explain their objects of observation as posited in the greater commentarial treatises, compassion merely observing sentient beings does not differentiate the sentient beings it observes as being either empty of true existence or empty of existing substantially. This one, right? As empty of having, this is so confusing, this phrase, empty of being a self-sufficient, substantial person, right? It makes no distinction in that way. What is it? Great compassion observing phenomena or dharma does differentiate the sentient beings it observes as being empty of being a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, although it does not differentiate them as being empty of true existence. And the third type of great compassion, which is called objectless great compassion, has an object. It observes sentient beings, but those sentient beings are qualified by being empty of true existence. And they all have the same aspect, like whatever sentient being they observe, they wish to be free from suffering. So to summarize again, the first type of great compassion that observes mere sentient beings is not qualified by any special wisdom, realizing emptiness of true existence or emptiness of the person being self-sufficient and a substantial entity. The second type of great compassion does qualify the sentient beings it observes as being empty of a person that is self-sufficient and a substantial entity. And the third type of great compassion, objectless great compassion, qualifies the sentient beings it observes as being empty of true existence. So everyone, please enjoy some water or tea. So the focus of your great compassion, when you meditate on it according to Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path, first starts with persons who are close to you. And then Tsongkhapa moves on to beings who are neutral. And then he instructs that after that, you should visualize your enemies. However, in the two Lam Rim treatises called the Swift Path and the Easy Path, because they attempt to make these instructions easy for us, they present the meditation on great compassion differently. They say it's much easier to visualize animals like sheep and goats and so forth and give rise to compassion in that way. Since this is such a fundamental and important topic, we're now going to meditate on compassion. So if you wish to meditate on the sevenfold cause and effect process in great detail, of course, you can refer to Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path, which is available in English and Chinese. It's quite easy for you to understand the translations and follow along. Of course, we don't have time to meditate on all the topics in great detail, so I'm going to pick out the very important ones. And since compassion is one of the most important topics, we are going to take some time here in the class to meditate on it. So how are we going to do that? First, you need an object to visualize when you meditate on great compassion. So who are you going to think about? Well, you could think about your parents, but a lot of parents these days are actually in a quite healthy and wealthy state, right? They're not necessarily suffering. And since the thought behind compassion is, may these beings be free from suffering, it's better if we visualize someone who is suffering. So we can take as our visualization a destitute sentient being who's even perhaps overcome with horrible behavior, suffering due to their ignorance, and visualize them and consider how they are overwhelmed by the three types of suffering, right? The suffering, the suffering of change, and all pervasive suffering. So consider them in this way. And then having visualized them, apply that to all sentient beings and consider how all sentient beings generally undergo the same types of suffering. And think, wouldn't it be great if they were separated from these sufferings? May they be separated from these sufferings? May I separate them from these sufferings? And let this turn in your mind again and again. And this is how we're going to meditate on great compassion. So as you visualize these things, it's important that some strong corresponding feeling arises in your mind, right? It's important that you really feel a response to this meditation. So please meditate on it. So concluding that meditation with the thought of joy, thinking, I gave rise to great compassion, such a special and profound mind, puts strong imprints in our mind stream to do so in future. Next is the special intention, sometimes translated as the wholehearted resolve. So we've just spoken about great love and great compassion. So great love being the thought, may all sentient beings have happiness, may I be the one to endow them with happiness, and great compassion being the thought, may all sentient beings be free from suffering, may I be the one to do so. But that alone is not enough to give rise to bodhicitta. We need one more step beforehand, which is this thought of the special intent. And generally speaking, as we discussed, hearers and solitary realizers do have immeasurable love and compassion. They do have the thoughts that may all sentient beings have happiness and may all sentient beings be free from suffering. But what they lack with these thoughts is, may I be the one to make them have happiness? May I be the one to make them be free from suffering? So it's a special level of responsibility, thinking, if I don't do this, who will? And that's what makes it special, quote unquote, is that the thought is superior to the attitudes of hearers and solitary realizers. So the next passage in Essence of Refined Gold says the special intention and the one effect, bodhicitta. So it sort of combines the two explanations. Geshe said to briefly summarize it, although he did read it down, so you can read it down and I'll summarize it. So we've covered the 6 causes, and now we need to give rise to the result of bodhicitta. So even though you may have given rise to these realizations of these 6 thoughts, you still don't have bodhicitta, right? Because you have not yet developed the thought that at this point in time, I am incapable to take even one sentient being to the state of enlightenment. And that is because I myself am not a Buddha, right? The Buddhas of the past have come and gone, so it falls upon my shoulders to take responsibility for all sentient beings. So may I achieve Buddhahood for all sentient beings. And if you are able to engender this thought in an uncontrived manner, that is actual bodhicitta. And if you make such a commitment and your commitment declines, you change your mind, then you fall to the lower realms. So with that completed, we've covered the sevenfold cause and effect instruction that is known as the lineage of vast conduct. And now we move on to the instructions for equalizing and exchanging oneself with others, which is considered the lineage of conduct of great blessings. So this second set of instructions is incredibly powerful, and it is, as said before, intended for sharper facultied disciples who first realize emptiness and then go on to generate bodhicitta. If you'll remember, the intended disciples for the sevenfold cause and effect instructions are those persons who first generate bodhicitta and then go on to realize emptiness. So with respect to the first part of the instructions of equalizing and exchanging oneself with others, the equalizing part is essentially the same as the meditation on equanimity, right? It involves cultivating the thought, all of us are the same in wanting happiness, and all of us are the same in not wanting suffering. So keeping this reason in mind, there is no justification for me being attached to some and hostile towards others because we are all the same. We just want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. And then the second part of the instruction is the exchange. So exchanging oneself with others. So essentially, this boils down to the fact that throughout our lives, we mostly think about ourselves and we don't think about others. But we want to turn this around. So instead of mostly thinking about ourselves, we exchange this self-cherishing with the cherishing of others. And we exchange this disregarding of others with a disregarding of oneself. So you'll see in Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path, in this section, he writes extensively on equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. And we unfortunately don't have time to cover all of Tsongkhapa's explanation. So if we sort of synthesize it down, this practice of exchanging oneself with others can be engendered through practicing Tonglen, right? Giving and taking meditation. So through focusing on great love, you practice giving, and through emphasizing or stressing great compassion, you practice taking. And that, in essence, is Tonglen. So the practice of giving and taking, or Tonglen, is actually not present in Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path. It does appear, however, in other Lam Rim instruction manuals. And it is said to be a very important practice in the mind training tradition. So the practice of giving and taking can be approached in two different orders, depending on the disciple. You can start first with giving, or you can start first with taking. And essentially, it's a difference between emphasizing compassion or love first. So if we start with taking, that involves first visualizing sentient beings before you, and then as those sentient beings breathe out. And in the treatises, it'll say they breathe out from this or that nostril, and Geshe said, it doesn't matter. As you visualize sentient beings breathing out, visualize that upon their breath, they're breathing out all their suffering and causes of suffering, which has the aspect of black light. And think that that black light enters through your nostril, and you have thus taken on the suffering and causes of suffering of all other sentient beings, and they are now free from it. So meditate on this visualization. That was taking. So now we move on to giving. And the reason I'm instructing in this manner is because in order to give someone happiness, it makes sense that you first take away their suffering. And that's why we started with taking. So now we're emphasizing the thought of love with giving, right? Because the thought of love is, may all sentient beings have happiness, may I cause them to have happiness. And with that in mind, from your nostril, you're going to visualize that as you breathe out, all of your virtues and happiness exit. And then when the sentient beings in front of you breathe in, they breathe in all those virtues and happiness. And then as they breathe it in, you should think joyfully, they have achieved my virtues and they have achieved happiness. So with this thought, we're going to meditate on giving. So we've meditated on generating bodhicitta by way of the sevenfold cause and effect instruction and by way of the instructions of equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. So there's no difference in entity of these bodhicittas, whether they're generated one way or the other. But I have to wonder if there's a difference in strength. Because if you think when you generate bodhicitta by way of really emphasizing great love and great compassion, then the bodhicitta that you give rise to arises more quickly and maybe in a more potent manner. So now to conclude our meditation on bodhicitta by way of the instructions of equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. Um, we've just spent time meditating on love and compassion, right? And through giving and taking, which emphasizes one or the other. So right now we have quite a noble attitude in our mind. So taking that noble attitude, this kind-heartedness we now have, we're going to transform that into a thought of bodhicitta, into a thought of, may I achieve Buddhahood for all these suffering mother sentient beings. So thinking, why do I need to achieve Buddhahood? Well, it is to separate these mother sentient beings from their suffering. And there is no other way to do that except by achieving Buddhahood myself. So with a strong feeling from the depths of your heart, now transform your attitude into the thought, may I achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all mother sentient beings. And now we're going to meditate on that thought. less. So now think that you've given rise to bodhicitta. And from now on in the future, when we meditate, I'm going to slowly extend the time so we meditate for longer. So now that we have given rise to aspirational bodhicitta, in Essence of Refined Gold, it says that merely meditating upon it is not enough. You must also maintain the following 4 trainings or precepts, as they're called. So, reading down, this is recollecting the benefits of bodhicitta. So, this generates enthusiasm for developing aspiring bodhicitta and ensures the resolve you have made does not degenerate in this life. Number 2, the second precept is to generate bodhicitta 6 times a day. So 3 times in the day and 3 times at night. And this is to strengthen your bodhicitta. Number 3 is to not mentally abandon any sentient being or give up working for their benefit. So now that you've actually given rise to this thought, you cannot forsake any sentient being. You cannot fall back into being close to some and distant from others and forsaking people. And number 4 is to accumulate merit continuously. Continuing down in the text, and I'm going to read it quickly, just as Geshe did, because he said the meaning is self-evident. If you read it yourself, you would understand. So for the transmission, recollecting the benefits of bodhicitta means maintaining continuous awareness of the following teachings. So, number 1, the moment you develop the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, you become an object of reverence for both gods and humans. By means of its nature, you surpass the brilliance of the hearer and solitary realizer arhats. You will not be harmed by diseases or evil spirits. The tantric accomplishments or the tantric activities of pacification, increase, subjugation, and wrath are achieved without difficulty. You will no longer be born into the 3 lower realms as a hell being, preta, or animal. Even if you do not attain enlightenment in this lifetime but are reborn in samsara, you will quickly gain freedom. The karmic seeds of even the gravest of your past negative actions will be quickly purified. And were the beneficial effects of developing bodhicitta to take form, the sky could not contain them. So make a determination not to degenerate the bodhicitta you have already developed and to increase it evermore. To read down quickly, so point number 2 is to generate bodhicitta 6 times a day to strengthen your bodhicitta. So to expand on that, Essence of Refined Gold says, number 2, giving up bodhicitta towards even a stranger has heavier negative karmic consequences than a monk breaking one of his 4 root vows, not to kill, steal, have sexual intercourse, or feign spiritual qualities. So do not give up bodhicitta until you actualize Buddhahood. Until then, recite the following verse 3 times each day and 3 times each night. So the verse is, I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by practicing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. The number 3 is to not forsake any sentient being after having given rise to bodhicitta. So it expands by saying we are developing bodhicitta in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Therefore, no matter how many of them relates to you, I think it means like retaliates against you. From your side, never abandon seeking enlightenment in order to benefit them. So it doesn't matter what anybody does to you, you cannot use it as a reason to forsake them. The 4th point was to accumulate the collections. So it's not enough to think, well, now I've given rise to the thought aspiring towards full enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. I don't have to do much else. Of course, you have to continuously train in accumulating the collections and purifying the obscurations. And therefore, Essence of Refined Gold says, If you develop a spark of bodhicitta even once, try to prevent it from degenerating. Also, try to further it by accumulating merit by contemplating the qualities of the three jewels, making offerings, meditating, and so forth. So, we have a little bit left in this section, and we can take some time out of the next class, which is on the first perfection of generosity, and finish off this section. Do you have any questions?
Geshe, so we have a friend Serene. She wanted to ask these questions from Wednesday's class. So I'm gonna ask on her behalf. So Geshe, we were taught to meditate on first point, for example, to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And point number two, treat all sentient beings with equanimity, regardless whether we feel neutral, resentment, or attached towards them. Right. So we were taught on these 2 points. So the question is, when we meditate on bodhicitta, during the session, do we keep on thinking of these 2 points continuously back and forth? For example, for the past for 10 minutes, or we should just do 1 point and stay on it and then move over to the next point in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so this is the first part of the question.
Okay. I think I got it. So based on how Geshe taught us to meditate in the last class, we covered 2 types of meditation, meditating on achieving Buddhahood for the sake of all beings, and also equalizing all sentient beings, so not being attached to some and hostile towards others. So when we're doing bodhicitta meditation, should we go back and forth between these 2 thoughts, or should we just focus on one for like 10 minutes, for example? I think that was it.
Yeah, correct. And then maybe
I'll start with this one. It's easier. Okay, so to answer your question, as you can see in the Sevenfold cause and effect instructions, equanimity is not officially one of them, but as the masters have taught, it's essential to equalize all sentient beings before you start to meditate on the Sevenfold cause and effect instructions. So to equalize all sentient beings is not easy, and it requires extensive reasoning, and you reason with yourself into seeing your enemies, your friends, and neutral beings as equal, right? And likewise, when you go outside and you encounter people in your daily life, you should also try to equalize them as you do in your meditation. And you do it according to your capacity. So approaching this topic as beginners, when we meditate on these points, we need to do so for a short time, right? So we have not achieved pliancy of body or pliancy of mind, wherein we can direct our mind to meditate on one thing for any amount of time we like. Likewise, our body cannot tolerate it for too long. So as beginners, we start with very short periods of meditation and then slowly increase. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I think Geshe is essentially saying equanimity serves as the foundation for the rest of your meditation. So get your solid foundation before you're moving on to your meditation with bodhicitta.
Okay, I think it's clear. So the next part of the question is, as we meditate and when we start to feel more deeply about bodhicitta, can we meditate beyond the 2 points or whichever points that Geshe has taught in the class? Can we go beyond those points and kind of like let our imagination go wild ourselves by thinking we want to liberate all sentient beings from all sufferings and the causes of sufferings. We hope that all hell beings can develop bodhicitta and be liberated from hell. Kind of like your own thoughts, expand it on your own, or what is the guideline in your own session? Like, do we stick to the points? Yeah.
So on the one hand, the stages of the path to enlightenment are not just taught by anybody. They were taught in our case, what we're following is mainly Je Tsongkhapa's great treatise of the stages of the path. And Tsongkhapa developed bodhicitta in his mind and achieved Buddhahood. So to follow his instructions is to be sure that you're following the instructions that will lead you to Buddhahood and bear fruit, right? You're following the instructions of someone who's talking from experience. On the other hand, it's true what you're saying, though, that whatever sort of good thought you can cultivate is excellent and it's helpful. Like you're talking about developing compassion or whatever upon seeing beings or thinking, may they give rise to bodhicitta or whatever. And it's not a bad thing. You don't need to meditate on the 6 causes in order when you see a being and, make sure you have the recollection of them as a mother, everything beforehand before you are compassionate towards them. Of course not. Whatever good thought is good. Just recognize that the compassion that we give rise to beings is also compassion not separated from attachment. So just contemplate these 2 points that if you follow the instructions as is, they are bound to bear fruit as they're coming from someone experienced like Tsongkhapa. It can also make a huge difference what you've been familiar with in your past life. Of course, we don't really know, but let's say you had very strong familiarization with thoughts of compassion in your previous life. Then when meditating on these instructions, you might not necessarily need to cultivate all of the preliminary instructions before you get to compassion, for example. You can just automatically give rise to it. So imprints make a big difference as well.